Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me, Robert Phoenix, and just gonna jump in here and do a Friday Astro Weather little Friday forecast. Don't I didn't have any guests scheduled for today because I was supposed to be at the place behind me today, which is Palm Springs. So I decided to pretend I was in Palm Springs because, well, since we're living in the uh, age of AI, in the virtual age, it's almost as good as being there. I almost did a Christopher Walken. It's almost as good as being there. I'd have to work on my walking a little bit. But that's one of the reasons why I don't have a guest today, because I was supposed to be there. But due to family circumstances, I am not required, but I need to be here. So a lot of you know that some of you have even met my mother, by the way, uh, that she has been dealing with health issues. And this last bout of uh, kind of a chronic condition with her heart has put her in a much more precarious place than she has been. So she was in ICU last week. She had to be moved to a heart hospital in Austin, and then they moved her a couple floors down into like general pop, and now she's going to be transferred to a kind of an interim care facility here in Kerrville. So it's been a very kind of intense ride for the last week. I mean, it all kind of started around Wednesday of last week, and so I've spent some time with her in the hospital in Austin, and Joan has been just absolutely fantastic, and spent some time with her. So she's had some connection with us, and now that she'll be in Kerrville, it'll be just much easier for me to pop on over and hopefully give her enough kind of moral support and um, just presence to help her deal with what she's going through. And really, what she's going through is the end of her life, right? This is something that we all um, have to face in one way or another, either directly or indirectly through people, pets that we love, right? This specter of death is always in the background of everything that we do. And it seems like a lot of the time, um, our activities are designed in many ways to keep us from fully embracing that and understanding that. And, every time that I have experienced the passing of somebody or something that's been, dear to me and close to me, it really creates this very peaceful void in my life. Oh, I froze up here. We got to freeze. Damn it. Let me reload this thing. See what happens. It's always interesting when we have at least one freeze per show. I may have to go and do just a quick reboot here. So give me a sec and I'll be right back. All right. Thanks for being patient. hopefully that's the only time we'll have to go through this today. But every time that I've experienced that, and I just feel like I come in contact with, at some point, a very peaceful void. I don't know if that's your experience or not, but that's been my experience. And it's always different, and it always shows up in a different kind of way or at a different time. But it really, I know it's a cliche, but it really clarifies what's important in our lives. And so it's been interesting kind of getting a front row seat for this, because when my father was passing away, I spent a lot of time with him, because I felt like it was important. And some of the stuff that I went through with him was, boy, it was deep, right? Like, you can't put your baby toe, in the pool when it comes to death, right? There's always going to be something about it that takes you into a very deep place. And I remember that at a certain point, my father, who was just, physically, things were just getting harder and harder for him to kind of deal with on a day-to-day level. And he asked me to put a bullet in his head. I swear to God, right? He said he was serious. Like, he wanted me to put him out of his misery, which I completely understand. I completely get. And I said, "Hey, look, Dad, that's a lot to deal with, right? That's a lot to deal with. First of all, that would be on my conscience, and second of all, I'd probably go to jail. So we're not going to do that, okay? We're not going to take you out that way." But I went online and I looked at Oregon and assisted suicide. I mean, yeah, you go to places, right? So now this is a whole different view, and I think my father just wanted to get it over with, and that's not where my mother's at. She doesn't want to get it over with. So these are two very different relationships with passing. And so today's show, the theme of today's show, right? We're going to look at the Astro Weather. Is we have all these planets now that are aligning in Aquarius. So we have Venus, and we have Mars, and we have Mercury, and we have the Sun, and we have Pluto, and it's this amalgam of energy that points to a new Aeon, right? A new time, because we're moving out of the Pluto and Capricorn time. And Capricorn represents time, right? That's what Capricorn is all about: measurement and time and history and efficiency and everything, Chronos and chronology, and Chronos is Saturn, right? And when you get old, you become, as if you're a woman, unfortunately, you become a crone, right? And a crone is derived from the word chronos. It means that you are, by result of aging, a byproduct of time, right? So we're moving out of this old time, and we're moving into a new time. And the new time is the unknown country, right? But we can see from the jump that this is very different. And we're seeing AI grow right before our eyes in the early degrees of Pluto and Aquarius. The latest development is voice to text movies. Like, this is the latest AI. Before, you could do voice to text. I could create a Draymond Green, and I could sample Draymond Green's voice, and I could put it in there and write some text, and I could get Draymond Green to say things if I wanted to. In fact, I did at one point. That's all going to be kids play, right? That is all going to be kids play. And at some point, the technology will become so powerful that I could do a show like this and I could talk into a microphone and AI would be able to create an entire scenario based on what I was talking about, right? Like if I needed visuals or I needed uh, things to um, back up my points or anything, right? Like if there were parameters in AI and AI was machine learning on the spot, which it can do, by the way, then it would begin to, in some ways, become a co-creator in the experience of the podcast or the stream. That's where all this is headed. And if you believe in Atlantis, this is all Atlantean tech. They had this stuff in Atlantis. They had the ability to turn uh, words into moving pictures, and I think that's probably what got Atlantis into trouble. Is the fact that this tech ultimately sort of spun out of control, right? And there was this kind of Sodom and Gomorrah moment where they had to like blow the shit up, right? Like this is getting too bad. So this is where we are right now. We can just see these things starting to happen and the developments start to take place right before our very eyes. Let's use another example. Tucker Carlson going to Russia. Like that so what does that look like? Right. Well, he's going there to talk to Putin, and Putin is, he's the first person to really do this and have a sit down. Whatever you think of Carlson, whatever you think of Putin, Peter Zihan believes that Tucker Carlson is a deep state agent and works for Russia as well. Maybe he does, right? But it's Aquarian because it's breaking the rules. That Tucker's breaking the rules. Oh, nobody talks to Putin. Nobody does that. If you talk to Putin, well, you're enabling a dictator. You're enabling a terrorist. So even though Tucker is a Taurus, he's cutting against the grain and he's breaking the rules. This is the time that we're living in now, and things are going to be said. Things are going to be shown. Things are going to be revealed that will be disturbing or upsetting to people. And sometimes it will be kind of its own nature and own accord. Sometimes it'll be planned out. Right. So we're living a really revolutionary time. And these planets right here, right now, as they have all assembled, and at the early degrees of Aquarius, with the exception of Mercury and the Sun, which are kind of moved on, this is a really, really important time. I chose the thumbnail for the Aeon or Judgment from the Rider Waite deck, which to me is very, I know the star card is supposed to be Aquarian, right? With the this female figure pouring out the contents of heaven. Who's that? Mary, Queen of Heaven, pouring out the contents of heaven. Anyway, that's connected to Aquarius. But the Aeon or Judgment represents the end of one time and the moving to a new time. And you can see it on the card where you have Gabriel, looking very feminine, by the way, blowing his horn or trumpet to signal the end of one world and the beginning of another world. And you can also see in the card that the dead are rising, right? Which is, I think, part of the story of Revelation and the end times, and that the dead will rise, and then they'll rejoin their creator in heaven. I think that's part of the Revelation story, and it's in there with the Aeon as well. And it's an interesting concept to wrap one's head around, that everybody who had ever been in a body on this planet, right, is either buried here somewhere, or their remains have become part of the earth, either through some form of decomposition, or they've been turned into ash, but they become part of the earth as well. So everybody that's ever been here, right, theoretically is still here, but they're not. But so it's interesting to understand from that perspective that even they are part of this new time, right? Like just because they're not here, it doesn't mean that they're not part of whatever's coming next. It's kind of an interesting thing to wrap your head around. So we're going to kind of get into some of this today. We're going to look at the chart today. Yeah, I got into trouble a little bit on Twitter yesterday, and I'm going to try to. I don't need to clarify what I was trying. I'm very clear about what I was trying to say on Twitter, but I kind of got into a little bit of trouble because in the true spirit of an Aquarian, I raised a few hackles as a result of a comment I made, and it has to do with what's happening in Georgia with Fannie Willis. Because we're finally starting to see now. I mean, this is all part of the whole Aquarian thing too, because we're starting to see what Aquarius does is it breaks up the illusion, right? It breaks up the illusion. If we start from Aries and go backwards, so Aries to Pisces theoretically being the realm of illusion, right? The realm of illusion, the realm of delusion, mist, divinity, visions, but also things like drug-induced stupor, all the things that go along with Pisces, right? What does Aquarius do? It breaks that stuff up, right? If to some degree, and again, please, if you're a Pisces, do not take this personally. But Pisces, to some degree, represents the trance, right? It represents the trance. It represents this kind of unified field that everything sort of exists in, for better or worse, right? And then what does Aquarius do? It breaks the trance. But that's what Aquarius does. It breaks the trance. It shatters the mirror, right? It shatters the illusion. That's what Aquarius does. And then we're moving around the chart from the other direction. We're going clockwise. And then theoretically, Capricorn would represent the beginning of a new time because Capricorn represents time, right? And so you would build and structure something that would be kind of out of the rubble of destruction of form of illusion. So there's other ways to move around the chart, right? But I'm just giving you an example of the role that Aquarius plays. It shatters things. It shatters illusions. It shatters idols, right? And the thing that Aquarius has inherently is that ultimately it makes all things equal, because that's the whole idea behind Aquarius, right? We're all supposed to be one, or we're all supposed to be part of this collective, right? And and I've used the analogy of the light bright toy, where we're all these individual lights on the light bright toy, and each light in the light bright toy, they're really not lights, they're just pieces of like plastic, right? And then the light is coming from behind the pattern, and then each one of those little colored pieces of plastic is illuminated. And then you can't really have the light bright creation without all the individual little pieces of plastic being illuminated at the same lumen and creating an entire whole, right? You take a few out and it's like, well, what's going on here? You take a lot out, you can't recognize what the form is. So to me, that's Aquarius, right? We're all those those points of color, and then the light of creation comes through us, and then we all realize it doesn't matter what color you are, right? It doesn't matter what color you are. That's, oh yeah, well we're lit up here. We're part of this creation, and I think that that's true about Aquarius. And then that's the upside. The downside is the lowest common denominator. That's the downside of Aquarius, right? It's kind of like, here's what we'll do. will just completely wipe out the middle class, and then will lift the lower class, and then everybody will kind of be in this one very limited bandwidth of economic power growth and strata. That's another version of Aquarius, right? That gets into the Klaus Schwab model, the World Economic Forum model. You will own nothing and be happy. You don't own anything. That's Aquarian, right? If you want to use a pot or a pan, the drone comes and drops it off. And if you're a good little boy or little girl, you might get cricket masala. You might get some nice cricket masala, right? So that's the lower level version of Aquarius. Yeah, we're all the same, right? We're all kind of under one socioeconomic rubric, but it's not really illuminating, right? It's not really taking full advantage of the potential of the individual, so that the individual, along with other individuals, have the opportunity to create something new, right? That's the downside of the Aquarian age. And so here we are. We're kind of in this really interesting place where there's this kind of tectonic shift happening, and lots of chaos is involved in these tectonic shifts, some of which are man-made, some of which are a byproduct of the times that we're in, plain and simple. And so it's up to us to be able to figure out which is which and what is what. And at the end of the day, it's all going to be some degree of chaos. You have to learn how to surf chaos so that you can navigate through the times that we're in. And there are going to be times where it will be disruptive. And maybe you will be an agent of disruption, or maybe somebody else in your life will play the role of an agent of disruption. It's part of the time we're in. But the other side of this thing is that if this is my contention, if you are completely honest with yourself, and if you are completely accountable for yourself during the time that we're in, you'll be just fine. You'll be fine, right? What does Aquarius hate? Aquarius hates hypocrites. It hates hypocrites. It's, when you're a kid, right? When you're a teenager, and most teenagers go through this because they begin to develop really powerful bullshit detectors. What do they theoretically hate more than anything? Hypocrisy. Because they can smell it. What they don't understand, in a certain way, because they haven't gone through life and been tempered, is that their parents or people around them in society have made decisions and life choices that they may not fully comprehend. So at a primary level, they see it as being hypocritical, that it is operating outside of a sphere of being authentic, or operating outside of a sphere of being honest with oneself. But over time, we as we grow, we understand that life is a lot more complex than that, and that we realize that people make certain choices or do certain things for things that ultimately have nothing to do with us, right? And then theoretically, if we become wise, we're not as harsh on certain people for doing those things, because over time we realize that there are conditions or whatever that's gone on in their life that's caused them to make certain choices or evolve in a certain way. But that's what happens when we're teenagers. We're rebellious. We say, well, this is bullshit. We call bullshit on the man, theoretically, right? And that's Aquarius. It's an Aquarian energy. It's a totally Aquarian energy. Adolescence is Aquarian. So now we're living in this time, right? We're living in this time where that's what we're seeing. We have a clear view now, or it's coming into focus, of hypocrisy and bullshit. because that's what Aquarius does. Now, the other thing of it is that sometimes people will go on witch hunts to demonstrate hypocrisy, right? And we see this a lot now in the truth community, right? The truth community is going to get worked over during this Aquarian period because we're already having all these discussions about, well, this person's a gatekeeper and this person's a gatekeeper, and this person is, the alternative media is now the new mainstream media, and there are these people that have been put into place because they want to control the flow of information, right? So I think we're going to see a backlash on that. We're going to see a backlash on people who have been incredibly popular in that world. Whether it's Alex Jones, Alex may fare a little bit better because he's an Aquarian, right? But people like Alex Jones and Joe Rogan and Lex Friedman and Tim Pool and all these people who have been, in the mix, right? In the mix for the last 2 or 3 years. Like they're going to be, under the heat lamp. Recently, Brett Weinstein did an interview with Tucker Carlson, and wow, all of a sudden, Brett Weinstein, boy, did he see the light? Didn't he have the Saul Paul moment? Well, Brett Weinstein was like pushing hardcore COVID shit. Like, again, people can change, right? They can change, and we'd like to think that they can change. So maybe Brett Weinstein did change, or maybe it's just another opportunity to rebrand Brett Weinstein so that he now has a larger platform. And then we have these gatekeepers when it comes to information and truth. So I think the truth community is going to have a very rigorous time during this whole period that we're in. Conversely, on the other side of the ledger sheet, the so-called political left is going to have a very difficult time as well. And we're starting to see that there's a lot of cracks in that, for lack of a better term, masonry, right? There's a lot of cracks in that masonry on that side. And if you look at the whole Fannie Willis thing, it's really it's like incredibly transparent. It's like so incredibly transparent that you cannot miss what's going on there. And what's going on in the whole Fannie Willis thing is, and this is what got me into hot water on Twitter a little bit yesterday, is that if you look at, and again, I'm going to be fair here, and I'm going to make a case for the other side as well. So just bear with me. But if you look at people like London Breed, who's the mayor of San Francisco, or Kimberly Fox, who is the DA from Chicago, or Mayor Beetlejuice, ex-mayor of Chicago, Muriel Bowser, the mayor of DC, Kamala Harris, right? These women represent a group that has been elevated beyond the capacity of their ability to perform. I'm sorry, I'm just calling it out the way that I see it, right? They have been elevated to a level of power that they themselves are not equipped to deal with. And I talked about that yesterday, and we're seeing it now. We're seeing this is the woman who has been charged with prosecuting the former president of the United States. And she is demonstrating every single day her ineptitude. And not just her ineptitude, but the crass corruption that she has been dipping into, right? Because there is this sense of entitlement that goes along with the position and the power, right? We're seeing this. And it's like, well, Could anybody be capable of that? Well, sure they could. Absolutely. But the reason why we're seeing this at this level is because if I was somebody who wanted to put people in charge, who would be beholden to me because I helped them get to that place. And those people that I would put in charge, even though I knew that they may not be the best or the most qualified candidate for the job, and that in and of itself is part of the strategy, right? That the people that would represent that group would be irreproachable. Like you could not question or criticize their job or their effort, right? They are irreproachable. And that's part of the strategy. This is part of the strategy. So if you were to say to somebody about Fannie Willis, pre-trial, right? What would you be accused of? You'd be accused of being a misogynist or a racist. I would want a lot of those people in power, to be honest with you. Like if I was a George Soros or whomever, that's who I'd want because they're irreproachable. And anything that they could do, anything they did, even if it was completely heinous and fallible, you really couldn't say much, right? Because we're dealing with a society now where there are protected segments of the society and have been for a while. So I brought that up. I said that what we're witnessing here is like a combination of Kafka meets Waiting to Exhale, which is really kind of what it is. Right? Because once you get into that part of the system, right, it becomes very Kafka-esque. And there's kind of very little recourse or very little justice, or very little, civil accord. This is what Kafka is all about. It's about the futility, right? The futility of the system, especially if you read The Castle. Now, just to be fair, right, my response was, well, on the other side of the ledger sheet, what do we get? Well, we get a lot of guys that look and talk like real strong Republicans. Like they pass the smell test. Like we'll use, I don't know, maybe Matt Gaetz as an example, right? And then really, what are they doing? Not much. Ted Cruz, not, he looks like he's a freaking conservative and talks like he's a conservative, but what is he really doing? He's feeding off the public trough and he's all hat and no cattle, as we say in Texas. That's the other side of this, right? So on the one hand, we have this sort of group that I mentioned in the tweets, but they're not alone. And these other people, what would you say? Well, they've been put there too. To some degree, they have. They start off and, it's like this guy, Scott Brown. Scott Brown, who took over for Ted Kennedy, right? Like he took over, he won. And I remember, I'll never forget Scott Brown driving to DC in his little pickup truck. Well, by the time it was all said and done, Scott Brown was, completely, quote unquote, one of them. One of them. So it's not like one side or the other is immune to what happens with the system, right? The system has an amazing way to make people corrupt, or at the very least, find the little seeds of corruption in them and then feed them, so that those seeds of corruption bear very bitter fruit, right? So, but this is Aquarius. This is what's happening now. The thing, when I just keep going back to like Johnny Rotten and the Sex Pistols and the birth of punk, and there are no sacred cows in Aquarius. No sacred cows. Everything is on the table. Everything is on the table. And if you think that whatever whatever group or whatever special interest group or whatever, right? It's all on the table. This is what's happening. This is where it all starts to get sorted out because there's no sacred cows. Now, the flip side of this is that there can be witch hunts as well with this Aquarian energy because everybody is so convinced about something, right? Everybody is so convinced about, like, I'll give you an example, like in the Super Bowl. And well, the Super Bowl is rigged. Well, there are portions of the Super Bowl that I think were fucking rigged. But there's this one play where Spencer Burford misses his blocking assignment. And then the guy next to him, Colton McKivitz, goes to turn to block somebody who's not there. And then Chris Jones runs in. And basically, it's a game-changing, almost game-ending play for the 49ers. And most people see that play and they say, well, it's rigged. But if you understand that Spencer Burford had the wrong blocking assignment and he came in for a guy that was injured, and then the next day the guy that was injured called him out on Twitter, like if it's rigged, you don't do that. But everybody was so convinced that that play demonstrated the rigged nature of the Super Bowl and that it must be true. Well, it's not, right? And this also gets into this kind of witch hunt mentality in Aquarius, because Aquarius represents groups, right? It represents groups, and it clearly can represent the madness of crowds. So this is all part of what we're talking about. Everything is on the table, right? Everything is on the table, and at the same time, because everything is on the table, there can be moments of tectonic disruption. Some of it will be good, and some of it will not be so good. And the thing about Aquarius, and I just have to bring this up, is that even when it looks like it's good on the surface, if you wait a while, you'll realize that it's not as good as it looked on the surface. And there are things where it looks disastrous with Aquarius. If you wait a while, you'll understand that disaster actually winds up becoming fortuitous. So it's a really fascinating time that we're in. And I just think that we have to the best of our ability, be really honest with who we are, and be, if we need to be, as transparent with whatever it is that we need to be transparent with, right? Because this is what Aquarius, sort of vibes with and respects. The kids say, it's keeping it 100 or keeping it real, right? That is the challenge through this time, is to keep it real. That's the challenge. And if you can keep it real during this time, you'll get through this time. Now, if you want to shock people, if you want to sort of break them up and wake them up, there's enough energy around to do that. Sometimes it'll just happen of its own accord. I mean, it's kind of the spirit of the time, right? The zeitgeist. That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with this very interesting zeitgeist. What the people who were once heroes turn out to be zeros. People who were once zeros turn out to be heroes. And then they could flip back again. So hang on, just, I wouldn't say hang on to yourself. Just be ready to, I would say be ready to use the energy in any way you can. That's what Aquarius does. Energy is energy, right? Energy is energy. Good energy, bad energy, it's energy. Let's say you go through a rejection, right? A rejection. Let's say it's a rejection with a group. Well, some people say, well, that's bad energy. you can use that energy. You can use that energy. Let's say you have a breakup or somebody leaves you, right? That's energy. What do you do with that energy? Well, you could have a sublime experience. That's energy as well. So this is what we're dealing with Aquarius, is how to use energy. And even if the energy doesn't show up as pristine and clear and as high voltage as possible, it's still there. You can do something with it. You can still use it as part of your life. Be like, well, they didn't like me, they dumped me. Well, fuck them. I'm going to make myself better. I'm going to invest in myself. I'm going to work out. I'm going to improve my wardrobe. That's energy, right? This is what Aquarius is about. Aquarius represents electricity. And we are moving into this electrical age. God help us, right? Like we're moving out of the Piscean age. Bye-bye oil, bye-bye gas, bye-bye heating oil. And we're all just going to be plugged in. Your electric stove, your electric car, right? All part of the grid. That's all very Aquarian. That's the Aquarian model. Because God forbid you're a bad boy or a bad girl, they just have to hit a little switch and turn your power off. Right? The other stuff you can power yourself. So this is part of what the age of Aquarius is about as well. It is the electrical age. So when we get into electricity, we get into power, right? That's the social, the sort of the societal infrastructure of it, but it's also related to you in your relationship with electricity or power and how you use it. That's the beauty of Aquarius. You find like value and charge where you can, and then hopefully, like if you want to play the sort of the grand fixed cross game, which Aquarius is a part of, then you bring in Scorpio and you bring in Leo and you bring in Taurus, and now you're kind of in an alchemical toroid. What does Scorpio do? Well, it transmutes it. I'll take that dark energy and I'll transmute it. It's what it does. Right. And then that's Scorpio. And what does Taurus do? It grounds it. And then what does Leo do? It's lit up by the power station. And now you have the ability to, be sovereign or individuated, right? So this is a big part of the Aquarian time we're in. And I feel like, when we talk about Aquarius, we talk about things like hope. And to me, that is a message of hope. When it looks like things are not in your favor, or when it looks like something has happened and it fundamentally shifts you, right, and affects your energy, you can change it. This is really what this time is about. What is one of the big things that, is part of this whole relationship with electricity? An inverter. Like you need an inverter, whether you're inverting from AC to DC, or your car battery to your house. You're using it for your house. You need an inverter. Solar cells need an inverter. And so this is a time of inversion. So you have to figure out like your own inverter in your body where you can, take one form of voltage and transform it into another form of voltage. Right? This is a fascinating time. Because the other thing too is like there could be a real leveling up with Aquarius. Real leveling up. And I think it's an exciting time. I think it's it's going to be weird. And the other thing with Aquarius too is, boy, it can get real fucking ideological. Real ideological. So we'll have that to deal with as well. Let's take a look at the chart and where we are now. let's bring some visuals on here. Visuals. Let's do some visuals so we know where we are. Bum, 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 bum. Okay. Okay. All right. Do we got it right? 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 We do got it right. Here we go. Okay. Here is our chart that we're looking at. Here we go. Real top heavy. Well, at least here it is. So we can see this superstellium in Aquarius right there. Sun at 27, Mercury 18, Mars 2, 0, Venus 0. Wow. This is really, really powerful, right? Really powerful. I don't know when we're going to go through another Venus Mars conjunction in Aquarius with Pluto. So Mars cycles are every 2 years, and a Venus cycles every 1 year. But we get retrogrades with Mars and Venus, so they don't always line up, right? This is about as close and pure as this gets in terms of an outer planet changing a sign, and then these two inner planets in such close proximity. This is really powerful stuff, right? So one of the things that we deal with Venus and Mars is the masculine and the feminine, which we've talked about, and how it's this really unusual conjunction, and people that have it have kind of a strange charisma, very very unusual charisma, and sometimes they're more feminine, and sometimes they're more. It's almost like a shape shifting kind of aspect in the chart. Um, you know, the one example that I like to bring up is Jeffrey Epstein, who has Venus Mars. He has Venus Mars conjunct in Pisces, because I think he's still around. But you look at Epstein, who's an Aquarian, by the way, 0 degrees, right? So this must be not Jeffrey Epstein's birthday, but these planets are at 0 Aquarius, which is Epstein's sun sign. But you see that with Epstein. Sometimes he looks very soft and very feminine, and other times, he's got the 3 or 4 day stubble, and he kind of looks a little more masculine and macho. So he moves back and forth, and it's a very shape-shifty kind of conjunction in the chart. And there are certain cases where there can also be sexual confusion. Like a person may say, "Oh, sometimes I feel more like a woman, or sometimes I feel more like a man," or vice versa, right? And so that can, those conjunctions can be pretty tricky for people to sort out. And unless you have some really evolved self-understanding, or you have good parents in your life who allow you to not be attached to kind of, whatever you demonstrate, right? You can learn how to integrate it. Like, oh, well, geez, I play linebacker on the football team, but man, I really like, the art of baking. And I like to bake, really ornate cakes and shit like that, right? And so back in the old days, they would say, well, no, you're a football captain or you're a linebacker. You don't do that. But I think now they're without this idea that, well, you have to choose a sex, like the evolved parents would say, well, it's okay to, do that. And it's okay to do that. You don't have to let either one of those things define you. In fact, they might make you more interesting. I think in young people, it's very hard because in as much as young people are rebellious, they're also very judgmental. So it's a hard time for people to go through understanding these inner dynamics. And I think if you have a Venus-Mars conjunction in your chart, you're a young person, it'd be tricky. It could definitely be tricky. Now we have Pluto in the mix here. I wonder, this is this. I wonder what we're going to learn about Jeffrey Epstein in like the next 24 hours. Because this is right on his sun. What are we going to learn about Epstein? Is Epstein going to be resurrected from the dead? Is something because the whole Epstein thing just went away. They just went away. You didn't notice that? Just whoop, there it went. We had this kind of orgy of redacted documents released, and then it just went away. So maybe we have a bit of a resurrection here with some of the Epstein stuff over the next. I wouldn't be surprised if something came out today because it's a Friday, and Fridays are always about news dumps. We've got some economic things that we're dealing with here. Venus is connected to money and finances and possessions. And here we go. It's coming in conjuncting Pluto, squaring Jupiter. And, we are theoretically being herded into the CBDC. And I wonder, what news we're going to get on that front today. There's like a weird, like this really weird big sell-off that's happened in the last 24 hours. I think it has to do with China. I just crossed my radar. So I think those things are clearly in the air, right? They're clearly in the air. And, people talk about this whole idea of cazimi and how these planets tend to cancel each other out when they're so close. I have a bit of a different take on that. And I tend to think of when it's real close or in this quote unquote cazimi mode, that what you're dealing with is a very complex assemblage of influence that's inside of the chart in the individual. It's very complex and it's hard to sort out. And because of the nature of how close these things are, they can operate in a way where whatever aspect is emerging or whatever aspect comes out at a particular point in time is the dominant aspect, right? And I've seen this in charts where people will have like 5 planets in one sign and they'll be within a 5-degree orb. And I've seen up close and personal how those planets operate. And they're kind of vying for control at times. And you never know what you're going to deal with, right? You never know what you're going to get. It doesn't necessarily mean that they cancel each other out. But what they're attempting to do is they're attempting to establish some sort of dominance or establish some sort of, I don't want to use the word control, but establish being the dominant imprint. And again, it depends on what planets are there, and where they are in terms of their sequence, right? So when we get into these really tight conjunctions, they're instead of canceling each other out, really what we should be asking ourselves is, how do they work together? How do they work together, and how do they manifest themselves? And we like to talk about novelty, right? Like novelty, where these things are brought together and something new comes out of it. So when we look at something like this, and especially in Aquarius, we are in the language of novelty, and we don't have descriptors, or we don't have models, or we don't have definitions at times as to how these things manifest and operate. That's part of it. I mean, that is part of it, because we cannot know everything. Isn't that a beautiful thing? We cannot know everything. And as an astrologer, we can make approximations and say, well, this is this, and this is this, and this is. But at the end of the day, it could be something completely different and new that we have kind of no foundational or historical lineage or identity with. Now what do we do? Now we're in a place where, okay, well, this is new, this is different. What do we do with it? How do we define it? And that's kind of where we are with these this stellium, right? I think on a personal level, I just look. This is just like me on a like I can see how this is impacting my chart in my life, right? Like I can just see how this is impacting my chart in my life. Like so, if I was Mars, which theoretically I might be, and the lovely and talented one was Venus, right? Which she is, and Pluto, the planet of death, sitting between us, right? Well, here we go. Like I can see that on a personal level because I'm dealing with somebody who is dying, right? And the person who's in my life and that I'm in relationship with is part of this process. That's just, I can personify that. Totally personify that. But you may not be going through that. So you have to have your own kind of relationship with what this means to you. And when I look at this, this Venus Pluto, and I look at the Aeon card, and I look at the dead being resurrected, that's what it feels like to me. It feels like this Venus Pluto conjunction is about resurrection, like some form of resurrection, and very powerful. It's like this is a very powerful energy, very, very powerful energy. If you've experienced relationship issues, this is a really profound time to I wouldn't say necessarily make amends, but you can transform a lot of baggage. A lot of baggage. I really feel like Venus Pluto is like, get into the now. Get into the now. That's what it feels like to me. Get into the now. Aquarius feels like it's happening now. This is the now thing. Hey, this is the now drink for the now generation. That's Aquarius. And it feels, okay, so I'm going to go a little bit further with this, right? It feels like a lot of people, and understandably so, have a lot of pain, a lot of trauma, a lot of sadness, a lot of things that keep them from being in the now. They want to hold on to it, or they don't know how to let go of it, or there's something that's, it's like this, I don't know, psychic Velcro, right? That attaches to an event or part of who they are that they carry with them. This Venus-Pluto conjunction, and especially as Venus kind of moves across Pluto and into Mars, this is a perfect time to get into the now. What if I said to you that whatever perceived pain, trauma, um, whatever that thing that you have in your life and you've been carrying around for a very long time, what if I said to you, within the next 48 hours, you can make a decision to move on from that and never look back? Would you do it? Would you do it? Some people would not do it. Some people would say, that's impossible. You don't know how deep it goes. You don't know how much this person made me suffer. You can let it go. Right? This is really an interesting time around this. Like, look where the moon is, right there on old Algol. What do we know about Algol? Well, Algol is supposed to be able to attach the head to the body, right? Not decapitated, not kaput, right? And that moon is moving into Gemini, and as soon as it moves into Gemini, it is fast, very fast. So here we are, right? We're on the outpost, Algol hanging by a thread, the gallows noose, the other shoe about to drop. And it's moving into trine with these planets. I think this is a very interesting time. I think if you are really, really committed to moving into the now and into the future, and you said to yourself, you know what? I'm moving on. I am moving on. I don't have to do this. I don't have to hold this. You can do it. Why? Because we're in fixed planet territory. And once you take action, those actions have permanent consequences. And we think of the word consequences as being bad. No, they can be good. They can be good. Here's what I think about suffering. And I've suffered a lot. Believe me, I've suffered a lot. A lot of the suffering I brought on myself. But a lot of the times that people hold on to their suffering and their pain is because they feel guilty. And they feel guilty that if they didn't have that in their life, that the other people in their life that may have been put through similar conditions that they have experienced, that they'll still be suffering. Like, they'll still be going through the effects of a bad upbringing or a terribly abusive marriage or whatever those things are, right? That's one of the reasons why I think a lot of people have a very hard time letting go, because they'll feel guilty. It's like survivor's guilt. And it doesn't mean that you have to indulge in it. Like, hey, I'm feeling so good. What the fuck's wrong with you? Can't you let it go? Right? That's not what I'm talking about. But I think it plays a pretty significant role. A lot of it is survivor's guilt. So, think about that. Over the next 24 hours, this assemblage is not going to be. This is a really interesting gateway. Very interesting gateway. Now, you may actually do things too that might be very sudden, and what some people might consider to be arbitrary. It's quite possible. Well, it may seem that way, but don't let it get to you, right? This is a very authentic time. We got Mercury squaring Uranus, right? And with a Mercury-Uranus square, we're trying to deal with ideas and information that challenge us. That's the Mercury-Uranus square. It's disruptive. Now, Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius, right? So what we're doing here is we're having conversations, and we're we're bringing up ideas that destroy old forms, ossified and fossilized forms. And again, it gets back to, this thing I said about Fannie Willis and Kamala Harris. And I'm like, yeah, it was a kind of a dangerous and risky thing to say. But take a look at their cities, right? Take a look at San Francisco. London Breed has been the mayor of that city for a long time, and it is a piece of shit. It's a piece of shit. You've got the mayor of Atlanta. And Atlanta, booming economically, but also it's a pretty violent place. Chicago. Now you got a dude there, right? And he's just kind of doing the same thing that Lori Lightfoot did. But all you got to do is look around. Just look around. So when you see something, when I mention something like that, how can you do this? It's an affront to, every single woman who's voted. It's like, no, it's not. Because this is where we are with Aquarius. Like, we have to speak about things that are uncomfortable truths. And I've said it before, right? Like, there are guys that theoretically look like me that are sellout asshole motherfuckers. And one of the reasons why we're in such a bad place is because of dudes like that, right? That they just lived off the fat of the land and their military contracts and all the lobbying money, right? And they like throw a few bones to their people. John Cornyn here in Texas is one of those guys. And he's just as bad as somebody like Fannie Willis or somebody like Cori Bush. He's just as bad as they are. He may even be worse because he comes off as being, well, I'm a Texan and I'm a statesman and I'm looking after the good of the people. And it's like, bullshit. Bullshit, motherfucker. You are looking after yourself. That's what you're looking after. And I'd be happy to go down that path too, right? But that's where we are, man. This is the time of Aquarius. And we have to be able to talk about these things in a way. So what gives you the right to talk about people who aren't even your own sex or aren't even your own? Look, I live in this world. I'm theoretically an American. So we all have the right to talk about something regardless of who or what we're talking about. End of story. This is, theoretically why this country was created. So we can have these conversations and then get into the dialogue. And you know what? If I'm wrong and you show me I'm wrong, great. Don't pin it on me as some kind of ideological cross to bear, that I have to take on. I don't buy into that. Neither should you. Neither should anybody. Doesn't matter your race or creed or religion. You don't have to buy into any of it. What you have to really just wrap your arms around is the truth. And it's not always easy to do that. Not always easy to do it. But if you can do it, then you will not fall under the spell of social programming, conditioning, and social engineering. And sometimes the truth is relentless, and it's not always fucking popular. They've turned it into kind of a popularity issue, with all these truth channels. But how much truth are they really telling? The ones that do get into it usually get kicked off platforms or sent into the hinterlands of BitChute, right? I mean, that's where you find, they won't be on somebody else's show because they're going to say something that may make them a little uncomfortable, right? So truth is productive and sexy and profitable up to a point. And then it becomes problematic. And I have to say, Jason Whitlock has done a tremendous job around some of this stuff. And he has his own cultural piece that I actually respect. And his latest thing is looking at people like Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharp and who else? Robert Griffin III, right? All these guys, Matt Barnes, Steven Jackson, they've all been elevated by mainstream media, and they all happen to be black. And Jason says they all fit a profile. And the profile is that they lean into these stereotypes and these cultural cliches of what it is to be a quote unquote black man in our society. And he makes this analogy about how the record company or the record companies promoted gangster rap because they knew it would sell a lot of records, but they also knew that it would be very divisive and it would create a lot of profit on the back end for the prison systems that they had invested in. So he's using the same analogy now with sports. It's like, okay, well, this worked really well in hip hop. Let's do the same thing in sports. So Jason is calling this thing out. And it's like, this is across the board now. We're starting to have very real conversations that may make people feel very uncomfortable. That's the spirit of Aquarius. But I really feel like, just getting back to this idea that you can, I'll just say it, you can make a choice. And my father was a really interesting guy in a lot of ways. And he would bring me concepts that were pretty advanced when I was a kid. And he would say, you don't have a problem if you choose not to have a problem. And as a kid, right, I was like justifying things in my life that made me suffer. I mean, again, I'm a kid. I'm like 12 or 13 years old. And he just kept telling me, well, that's your choice, right? That's your choice. Like, fundamentally, he knew things that should have catapulted him much further into the world than they did. But I've always remembered that, right? And he is not wrong. He is not wrong. So you have a choice, right? And this is the lineup right here. What do you choose? If you really could walk away from the story of your pain and do it without looking back, could you do it? Would you do it? And why would you wait till next week or the week after or the week after that? Why wouldn't you do it today? Why wouldn't you do it right now? You can. And when you get down to that, boy, people get real, oh my God. Man, I got some things I got to work out first. I got to work out the things that I have to work out the things to let go of the things that I have to work out. Just something to think about. And here we go. True node conjunct Chiron. Again, right? When we think of Chiron, we think of pain. Like the wounded healer. We all have it. In Aries, it is what? It is humanity. Aries is humanity. It is the individual, the singular I, right? And it also represents will. What's really interesting? I'm thinking about this thing that happened in Kansas City on Wednesday with this true node Chiron conjunction in Aries. And it really feels like there's a bigger story here with that. It feels like there was something that was supposed to happen and some other weird shit happened. Do you know what I mean? Okay, because you had this guy, right, who they let go now. This Omar guy, they let him go, right? The guy that theoretically blew up the hotel in Dallas, Fort Worth. Same guy, same age, 44. They arrested him. I think they let him go. But then you had these three other guys. Of course, the number 3 is big. and they're having a shootout, right? They're having a shootout there. Now, of course, they're using semi-automatics. So if you wanted to ban a semi-automatic, you'd want shooters with a semi-automatic. But it feels like those guys were beefing, right? That like there was some kind of beefing thing going on. And then there was this other thing going on with this other dude, and there might have been a third thing going on, right? So whatever happened in Kansas City, I think some of it got fucked up. Like, how often do you have an individual tackle a gunman? Like, that rarely happens. And yet that's what happened. You had a guy run this guy down and tackle him. Like, that shit never happens. Usually what happens? The guy gets blown up, shot, kills himself, leaves a manifesto, right? That's usually what happens. That didn't happen. So to me, this was very interesting, right? Like if you look at this as being some kind of propaganda to take away guns or, hammer away to 2A, I think it failed. I think it totally failed. And that, to me, that's Chiron. It's like, uh-oh, you tried there, but it didn't really work, did it? Right? Okay, I just wanted to bring that up. But as it relates to you, right, you as an individual, and this whole idea, right, like, yeah, we're all wounded. We're all wounded. That's Chiron and Aries. We all are wounded. We are, just by the dint of being here, right? We are wounded. And then, do we have the option of moving on from it? Absolutely. And I feel like that's also part of the discussion right here with the true node, Aries will, Chiron, right? Okay, let's sew it up. Let's sew it up. So if I told you from this day forward that you, if you wanted to, could leave your pain behind or leave your trauma behind, leave your story behind. And if I told you from this day forward, you will be as integrated as you will ever be, and that you did not need to do anything else to make anything more of yourself or less of yourself, that you had everything that you needed to have right now, and all you needed to do was just accept it. If I told you all those things could be here and now for you, would you take them? Or would you need convincing? And maybe you would say, well, I'd like to accomplish a few more things or do this, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I really want to do this. But it's different than saying, I need to do this in order to get better. And that you have everything you need right now. Would you do it? I think I would. I would do it. Why not? Why not? Because at some point, our stories and our pain, those changes get heavier and heavier and heavier. And you know what? I got a front row seat right now of somebody who is exiting this world. And I got to tell you, I came to this conclusion last week that, quite frankly, I want to get as much out of life as possible while I'm still here and still healthy. And that's part of what this is about too, right? And you could, and for me, it's like, okay, just make the decision. Make the decision. And even like the small stuff. There are big issues in our life, don't get me wrong. But even the small stuff, like, don't need to go there. What's important? What's important is maximizing your time while you're here. And you may say again, well, this is just a matrix. And no, this is all just scripted. Well, fucking maximize it. If that's the case, then go down that path and say, I'm going to break out of the fucking matrix, right? Or whatever it is. Maximize your time here. Because again, I don't know how much time we have left. Let's be honest about this. When we're in Pluto and Aquarius, shit is like, really explosive, volatile. Things could end very quickly. Now, doesn't mean they're going to end tomorrow or the next week. But I think that we've been under this illusion for a long time that things are just going to go on forever. Like, next year there's going to be a football season and another Super Bowl, and we'll have to deal with Patrick Mahomes again. And that's not necessarily true. And that has nothing to do with, an EMP or disease X or whatever. And it may have something to do with any one of those things. Make the most of your time here. Get the most out of it as possible. Because there are things that we cannot experience outside of these three-dimensional bodies that we can inside of these three-dimensional bodies. And that much we know as a fact. Although I'm sure there are any number of people who've experienced intense pain in a subtle body. I've heard many stories about it. So it doesn't mean that you get out of pain, but it's a different kind of pain. All right. I think that's it. What do we do? An hour and a half? Let's see. Where are we? Comments. Let's see. What do we have here? Look at this. Steve Letro lives a good life. May off to Hawaii for 2 months of scuba and farmer markets and lunch at Lava Lava Beach Club. You got Steve. You have the right idea. What's Harriet say? One thorn of experience is worth the whole wildness of warning. James Russell Lowe. I don't like that. Fran, people die unexpectedly every day. Absolutely. You would know. Fran's a medical professional. Who else we have here? Zoracle Dax, don't be sorry for me. It's okay, right? It's really okay. It's part of life. Change your mind and enjoy absolutely. I need my pain. That's the grit that makes the pearl. Okay. That's fair, right? That's fair. Some people need that pain. Other people hold on to their pain like they clutch a pearl. What else do we have here? I use my broken heart to empower others every day. It's healed me and now attracting miracles. I think that that's a beautiful thing. And, your broken heart is not the story. It's not the story. Your broken heart is the vessel, right? It's not the story. All right. What else do we have here? Thank you, Robert. I'm dragging Darling to Hawaii. We're 70 and 68. Never too beautiful. I get chills up my spine. Nope, it's how I overcame it. Okay. Who else do we have? Any other comments? Live like you are dying. Tim McGraw. Son of Tuck McGraw. Interestingly enough. Fran wants to remind me, was a medical professional. Okay, so you're not a medical amateur. You're just not getting paid for your medical experience and knowledge. Let's see. Anybody else? I agree with Ruth. Is true. Energy cannot be destroyed; just changes. That's the inversion model. Look at Tom. The dying is easy. It's the living that's hard. Bring Mom her favorite food. We've been doing that. Is Astro Weather a Page of Cups moment? I don't know. Is it? Can it be the King of Cups? I'm a little too old to be a page, but uh, the innocence is always welcome. Let's see. Anyone else? We're all dead. The Earth was destroyed centuries ago. There's always a turd in the punch bowl. Okay, so hear me out. If that's true, then take full advantage of your death. Take full advantage of your death. Okay. Are we good? The King of Wands. Yeah, I can relate to the King of Wands. Pain don't hurt. Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse. Jeff, who's an Aquarian, comes in and says, I think the best part of life and death is staying in the ether for thousands of years and coming to the earth at the right moment. Somebody has to do it. There you go. It's a dirty job. You've been nominated. All right. I think I'm out of here. Thanks for being here. Thanks for participating in the show. Hit the like, subscribe. If you want, buy me a cup of coffee. And I'll be back here on Sunday night with a new microphone. I got a new microphone. I can't wait to use the new microphone. It'll be marvelous. All right, you guys take care. Have a wonderful day and wonderful weekend. And we'll see you on Sunday night. Bye for now.